What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boys over here at Three Man Weave. I'm your co-host CJ, here with my lovely co-host
Sir.
ZD on this Wednesday night, September
Yes,
10th.
sir.
Uh, we got huge news to talk about for
Oh
all our
man.
audience. Gosh, Josh Giddey signs his extension, and then we also have the MIP predictions as well for this upcoming season. And we have our off-season files. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the Portland Trailblazers. So how are you doing tonight, ZD, on this Wednesday night?
I'm good, man. I appreciate the intro. I'm feeling pretty good. Like I was chopping it up with you for, almost 45 minutes, but just a lot of good things to talk about, man. We spoke about Giddy at the end there, but Denny Advia, Portland, what they're doing, very interesting. And we got a couple other interesting players as well to talk about. So feeling pretty good, bro. Got a workout in. Haven't got a chance to hoop in a little while, but hopefully I can do that. We talked about fantasy football as always, but just looking forward to what the week brings, man. It's our Wednesday, like you said, it's September 10th. I'm feeling pretty good. But what about yourself, my man?
Doing good, bro. Been kind of locked in, for opinionated opinionated sports. Just have been doing the ballers of the week for college football,
Yep.
and we're also doing our fantasy league. I'm doing a little show, like a weekly recap show. So
Yep.
trying to stay locked in with that get my recording process and how I'm gonna edit them and what I'm gonna say in the show. So it's been giving me something to work on, and in the meantime, kind of just waiting for football games to come on at this point of season, basketball news, and then obviously we record. But besides that, bro, it's doing good. Can't complain. Been trying to stay locked in, and
Good,
this
bro.
football
Proud of
season's
you,
is
man.
definitely been entertaining so far. So I can't complain.
Yeah, for sure. We had a week one banger, Bills versus the Ravens. And yeah, I'm proud of you, dog. I know you got a lot of work to do, but man, let's hop right into it, man. Josh Giddey re-signing with the Chicago Bulls, 4 years, $100 million. I wanted to touch on it for a second, but I think this is it's a good place for him to be, especially with where he's come from. Obviously, being on the Thunder previously, having that little hiccup in his career with the minor, whatever. We're not going to talk about that, but he was able to find some rejuvenation in Chicago. We were going through his stats. He shot around 38% from deep last year, which was actually a career high. To me, that was what stuck out most. Obviously, getting the 15, 7, 8, almost 16 points a game with those other counting stats as well is extremely valuable. And we saw him sign for a pretty good number. I wanted to touch on the Chicago Bulls negotiations and their ability to really leverage their future. You spoke about this a couple minutes ago before we started recording, but Chicago has to think about this from a long-term perspective. They can't go out and hand Josh Giddey $40 million and be like, oh, he's going to be able to lead us to a championship, because he's not.
Right.
We're not going to ask we know the answer to that question already. He's not going to do that. So the Bulls are going to continue to build through the draft. Mataz Buzelis, you talked about Kobe White. Now he's set up for an extension year this next offseason. So he's playing into a contract year. And I think Josh Giddey is a really good franchise piece for them going forward. Somebody who's going to be able to do similar things for the next few years and who isn't even in his prime. I think this next year again, he's going to improve on this, the last season that he had. And, I'm not going to spoil what you got coming up later, but there's some conversations that will need to be had if he's performing at the level that he's performing at. The Chicago Bulls are not a scrub team anymore. They're no longer at the bottom of the barrel. They're usually in the playing
Right.
conversation. So, we can see Giddey playing some playoff basketball. I know last year they had that hiccup in the playing game, embarrassing. Me and CJ already spoke about that too. Just no showed, and sometimes that happens. They weren't able to get the W, but I'm excited to see what Giddey has to offer this year and just his little bit honestly dark history. For the Thunder, I think this is becoming a bright corner that he's turning around. So shout out Josh Giddey. I know CJ and I were excited to see that headline. Obviously, Shams broke the news. Shout out Shams. But yeah, the 4 years, 100 million. I think 25 million a year for the next 4 years. Pretty solid, bro.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think it's a perfect number for him because I feel like that's the thing when you're trying to in negotiations, right? You're trying to see what other teams value him at, and not a lot. I don't think any team gave him an offer, so it's kind of in the Bulls'
Yeah,
hands where they could kind of have
that
the
is a good
leverage
point
in a
too.
point, And obviously, we've seen me personally. I know that Josh Giddey is a great basketball player. It's just kind of what he lacks in come playoff time, and that's the 3-point shooting and defense. It's kind of hard for him to be, like you were saying, the best player on a championship team. So obviously great pickup for the Bulls, or, extension. He was on the team already, but I think it's a good building block for them because now they kind of have a direction that they're moving in. I feel like it was always Giddey. It was just kind of the amount of money they were going to pay him. And the fact that, I think you said the number, if it was more than 32 or 30, they end up having to only pay 50 or 25. So a year for him. So I think that's a great number. And, what they got going on in the, in their future, the Kobe White, Matas, they have like good young pieces. I feel like Giddey's going to be kind of the floor general for them and kind of dictate the tempo and stuff because, he's always doing the outlet passes. He's always getting the boards and pushing the ball. So, it's never his skill that I was questioning. It was just kind of how much do the Bulls value him, and what is that going to look like in the future for them? Is that going to be being a solidified playoff team and not being a play-in team pretty much every year? So I think that's it's exciting for them because I think, they have a lot to prove. Giddey has, a lot to prove just getting this bag, and I think he's going to do great. I think he could potentially be in the conversation for our most improved. I think that's, especially with this extension, and, realistically, if he's getting 21, 22 points per game, averaging the same numbers he did, I think it would definitely be a conversation. So something, I wanted to bring up, and I think it's a great pickup for them, for the Bulls. I think, not saying it's a needle mover and they're a solidified playoff team doing this and doing that, but I think it's good for them to have someone to build their team around, and he's a great player. So, you can't be mad at it, and you got him at a discount, so shout out to the Bulls, shout out to Giddey. I think the Bulls went about it a great way, didn't overspend for him, and Giddey is a great player. So I think, I knew that whenever he got traded when we traded him for Caruso, he's going to have the opportunities now, and he has the keys to the team. So it's going to be great to see him, being there for a little while. They could kind of build around him and see what the Bulls can do because, they're not a bad team. We went over in our offseason files. They have good young assets. And, I think with the extension for Giddey and Kobe White's contract year, they might be making some noise in the East, man, especially the way it is. We've been talking about the East for a while this whole offseason, and just the way the condition it's in, they could potentially be a solidified playoff team for all we know. So.
Yeah, bro. Nah, bro. And you brought it up, but that trade is looking pretty good. And I wanted to touch on this too before we head out of this topic, but the CBA is changing. I think the Bulls understood the landscape and what they're heading into. They couldn't afford to be in the apron for paying Josh Giddey $40 million or more. I think as we progress forward, you're going to see some teams negotiate a lot harder. It's going to be the war on value. I think there's going to be a war here with certain players thinking they're worth more, and then teams deciding whether or not that's their actual value. One of those players is Trae Young, who's coming up, who's extension eligible as well. You brought up his name, who plays what? Who's extension eligible for the Bulls? Kobe White, right?
Yeah,
it's Kobe White. So there's a couple guards I think that are going to become extension eligible pretty soon that are really interesting, but I think there's going to be a little bit of a war on value there. But I think the landscape of the CBA, the aprons, the penalties for all that, teams have to make certain decisions that are really impactful. And I think this contract is going to be really valuable. The last question I was going to have for you, if he's able to get 19 a game, 6 assists, 7 assists, 8 rebounds, like that's a steal, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah,
$25 million.
$25 million a year, and he's young, and it's like you haven't really had that type of player on your team. You've had DeRozan, you've had Levine, but not someone that is almost averaging a triple-double as a 24, 25-year-old, whatever he is, So, yeah, definitely a steal. And he's a good player, too, so it's like...
Yeah, it's solid. You can't... I think it would... Basically, the Bulls put themselves in a position for this contract to be an absolute steal. So props to them. Props to Giddey for getting his money. I think this takes us into our next topic, though. We're going to do our most improved player predictions for the 2025-2026 season. A lot of interesting guys. We got 4 different dudes. If you've been rocking with 3-man weave, you know how we do it on this show. We usually try to give you 4 or 5 candidates. Josh Giddey is definitely a dark horse, though. I didn't see him on any odds boards. Went through FanDuel, through Yahoo, went through a couple of the leading, BetMGM, Caesars, and I didn't see him on there. So I'm sure they'll most likely he'll make his way onto that list at some point. But to start it off, man, we got none other than Denny Avdia from the Portland Trailblazers, who's we're actually doing our offseason file over. So, we're going to get a chance to speak about him a little bit longer. But I think this dude just has gone under the radar the last few years since being traded from Washington. I think he's been given the opportunities in Portland to really come into his own. We saw him average 15 points a game with 7 boards last year. He's got a 6'9" frame. He's a very versatile offensive player from Israel. And I think Portland's a really good situation for Denny. I think when we're talking about being the most improved, you obviously have to improve. So you need to look for players with upside who can potentially, kill career years, outdo themselves. And I think Denny Avdia has a really good chance. He's surrounded by Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe. I think the situation in Portland, to me, is why he's on this list. I think just given the offensive keys and the ability to really play make for himself, I think he has some issues on the defensive end. He's not a super quick player. He plays a lot slower. He plays with great pace. I think Denny Avdia is an underrated player because of his pace. He plays a little bit slower, but I think that's what catches people off guard. He's a very good finisher, and he can also shoot the three as well. I think the Blazers are just putting him in a good spot to be an efficient player. And I think he's been under the radar. It's not somebody we talk about a lot on this show, but somebody you got to respect. And at this point, for what Portland really needs, Dame's going to be out for that year. He's going to step into an offensive role immediately and probably be their leading scorer. That's going to be my hot take, honestly.
I would say either.
I didn't want to say it, but man, I think
agree.
so.
I agree, yeah, because realistically, maybe Shaedon Sharpe.
Sharpe.
That's
right.
where I was kind of like either one. He's going to be up there. He's going to be the second or the first leading scorer for the team.
Jeremy Grant's there,
right?
Right.
But no, yeah, I agree. I agree with everything you said. I think Denny Avdia is definitely one of those players that goes underneath the radar. For one, because he plays for the Trailblazers and they have not been good.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
Also, just I think. We were seeing whenever Portland was going on their run, kind of what he was able to do. I think he was dropping 30 and getting almost triple doubles. He's been a really good player. He was a good player when he was on the Wizards as well. So the fact that they were able to snag him up and kind of, I wouldn't even say a renaissance year for him because he hasn't been in the league for a long time. I think it's just kind of more of an opportunity, and just developed into the type of player he is now. And like you said, pretty much score on all 3 levels, and I feel like with him it's really just the defense, but for a young team that is trying to get their footing and figure out their identity, I feel like him being potentially the leading scorer or a main focal point of the offense is going to help him out a lot. And I think he's going to have the opportunities with, like you said, Dame being out and getting rid of
Simons,
Anthony Simons, so it kind of opens up opportunities more for him. So yeah, I think super hot on Denny as well. I think he's gonna have a great year. Probably potentially 20 point per game score, honestly.
Yeah, 18, I think, and it's just the platter is there for him to eat. Now more than ever, they need his scoring, and like CJ said, I think the only thing he can really work on now is his defense. And I think Portland's willing to take his offensive versatility. He's had some continuity there, and yeah, bro, he's looking pretty good. He's looking primed for a really good season.
Yes, sir. I agree. Going on to the next person we have on this list, Jonathan Kuminga. I feel like Kuminga is definitely the talk for probably the rest of our offseason until he ends up getting extension or signing to a different team. But the type of player he is, even if he does stay, or if he does stay on the Warriors, it's going to be, Steve Kerr just giving him the opportunities. And I think at this point, there's not really any other choices on the roster for them to really develop. And if Kuminga stays on the Warriors, I feel like it would be a perfect situation for him to have a MIP type of year. He's probably going to be getting starter minutes. He might be coming off the bench, but be getting 30 minutes a game, or he might just be starting. But kind of what he's able to do, being the versatile forward that can shoot threes and defend, I think it's what exactly they're missing, and no reason why Steve Kerr really hasn't been playing him. But even if he does end up going to a different team, I think that will help his case even more for this award, because wherever team he goes to, they're probably going to give him way more opportunities than the Warriors have given him in the past couple years. So I think, Kuminga being number 3 on this list, definitely a great pick because, he's just going to have the opportunities more, and hopefully the Steve Kerr and the Warriors kind of
Yeah, they
understand
let him.
the situation
Yeah,
that they're in and let him ball out and do what we know
they
he
take the
can do.
reins off. Yeah, they've been treating him like a baby since he came out of the Ignite. This dude has a NBA championship ring. I think Kuminga needs to be playing 30 minutes a night at least. I think Steve Kerr has done him wrong. You brought up a really good point, though. Even if he doesn't sign the qualifying offer with the Warriors, he's still going to go to a situation where they expect 20 a night. And I think he's one of the best scorers we have on this list, no doubt. He's probably the most athletic person we have on the list. I think when we talk about Jonathan Kuminga, you brought it up, but the defense, the corner shooting, the corner threes, right, the athleticism, all of those things that he brings to the game, it's very special. It's been an interesting story in Oakland, in seeing where the Warriors are at in San Francisco. Like, I'm not really sure if there's because I'm not like a big Warriors fan, so I don't want to speak into it too much. And like, I don't want to disrespect the Warriors people who probably really care about this, but I'm pretty sure there's bad blood between Steve Kerr and Kuminga. I don't want to speak on it too much, but it looks from
like
like
there has to be, bro. I mean, why are you
right,
not
bro.
playing one of your best young
That's
players?
what I'm saying. Like from the outside looking in, like we're not, analysts, but like me and CJ can definitely see that there's a little bit of bad blood there, and that's interesting to me because I wonder some of the conversations that have happened behind closed doors. The reason I'm bringing it up is because it clearly impacts him on the court and what he's able, the opportunity. And I think this award is the opportunity award. You need to make sure that, to build on a career year, and Kuminga ended up averaging 15 points last season. My goodness. For him to get that 20-point marker and really step into being one of the more special players that we have in this league and getting the recognition, I think he just needs the opportunity. You did a really good job of bringing that up. And yeah, it's just been an interesting story over in the Warriors camp, kind of what's been happening with Steve Kerr and Jonathan Kuminga. So hopefully it turns out good. We know he hasn't signed his qualifying offer yet, and that's unfortunate. I think he'll get 30.
I was about to ask,
if
what do you think he's?
Yeah, probably 30. Like 30, a little more than that, just because of his defensive upside. I'd say he's one of the better defensive players on this list too, but probably third because the next two guys are real good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Kuminga's special, bro. He's valuable. We know he can score the ball, shoot the three.
Do you think
shout out
he's
Jonathan
more
Kuminga.
valuable than Josh Giddey?
Not at this moment.
But you would pay.
But I think
you would think he's going to get paid more than Josh Giddey.
Yeah, because
that's crazy.
Because again, isn't that crazy?
That's a crazy.
Like, I think Giddey's a bit more valuable because of the and that's a really good question, CJ. But to break it down for the listeners, I think Chicago's situation is a lot different than any other team in the NBA. Mind you, if somebody goes out and gets Kuminga, we've talked about the Kings, like they may not be able to offer 30 million, right? That may be why Kuminga hasn't gone there, right? He's looking for a certain number, and I think there are teams out there who would be willing to bite on the Kuminga at that number just based off of, again, he's a little younger. I think he's a little younger than Giddey, even though he's been in the league a similar amount of time.
Yeah,
I just know he was very young. Yeah, he's 22. He just has the defensive upside, and I think that's something that Giddey really struggles with. I think Kuminga comes with all of the things Giddey comes with besides the assists on top of the defense and more athleticism. So right. I think a team would bite. And that's a great question, though. I think, unfortunately for Giddey, being the franchise player of the Bulls comes with some stipulations and some, markers you got to mark down and be aware of. But I think he'll be fine. I think Kuminga will be fine, too. We'll just have to see what the number is.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Yeah, bro. But going into our next player, man, this dude's on the Houston Rockets. We know the Terra Twins, Amen Thompson, man. We think Amen Thompson's prime to really have a great year. Kevin Durant coming over from the Suns and shifting focus. All the focus is going to go towards KD, especially on the offensive end. And I think this is going to give Amen Thompson some opportunities that weren't originally there. We saw flashes last season, when he hit the game winner against the Celtics. He had a couple really good performances against the Warriors in the playoffs. So we know he's a playoff riser. But we saw flashes of his offensive capability, and I think that's going to be on display next year. We know he's also very athletic as well. I would say giving Kuminga a run for his money. Mm-hmm. But I think the development that's happened for Amen Thompson in Houston has been I would say it's been the best on this list. It's
100%.
just Ime Udoka believing in him 100%, letting him be out there, go be a wildcat, being the defensive stalwart that he is, and then continuing to grow his offensive game. It's just been lovely to see. And I know Houston Rockets fans are really excited for this upcoming season from him. I think this is where he takes another big step and becomes one of the premier players in this league. And he's already made a defensive team. We know the capabilities on that side of the ball, but I know you're going to talk about it. The offensive side of the ball is really what I need to see from him. It would be dope if he could get a great 3-point shot, continue to work on his free throws. I think the athleticism and his driving ability is already at an 8 out of 10. I think if you just got to work on the playmaking ability a little more and the shooting ability, I think that's what takes Amen Thompson over the hump. So shout out to him, man. I think, I know CJ's excited for his upcoming season. I think Houston's just in a good spot, bro. They are worrisome. I don't think the Lakers are going to beat them once this year, which is kind of scary.
Wow.
I think if everybody's out there, I worry that Şengün's just going to give us fits. We don't have a center who can guard him. He's playing really good in Eurobasket, which we haven't talked about, but I think he kicked out Jokic just the other day. Amen Thompson as well, Kevin Durant, Jabari Smith. I think Houston is just in a prime position to really take over. So I think Amen's going to be a main reason for that, bro.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree. I think, this upcoming season for Amen is definitely, a season I'm looking forward to. Like, I'm keeping an eye on him just because of what he was able to show me this past season, being one of the best, not even just perimeter defenders in general in the league, making first team all defense in his second year. It's the possibilities are endless. So just seeing what he can improve on, and more than likely, I feel like it's probably going to be the scoring department. He might not be shooting 35% from three, but I think it's just the offense and it running through KD and Şengün, just kind of playing off of them. I think he's going to find the holes in the defense and get like the dunks and get the fast break points. That's the kind of mold I see for him right now. And then once he is able to get that consistent jump shot, then like you said, man, that's when he becomes all NBA type of player, all-star every season. So it's going to be exciting to see, what he can do. And I think, you brought it up. I think the team he's on right now is, arguably one of the best teams in the West. And I think with the development that he's had in this offseason, it's going to be incredible to see what he can do, man. I think he's due for another breakout season. He got into the limelight for this past season, and then he's going to be, one of the stars. I think he's going to be an all-star this year. I think he's going to be
bro.
one of those.
Okay. You think so? I'd have to agree with you. I think if he gives you the 3 steals and gives me 15, 16 points with a couple boards, bro, I don't see why Amen Thompson is not going to be if they win 50 games, I think he wins most improved player. I hate to say this to our next guy, but I think if he wins if they get a good record and he's a part of that offense and he's growing, I think he's going to win this award. But take it away, CJ.
Yeah, man. Going on to our number 1 player for the most improved player prediction, the one and only Andrew Nembhard, man. Coming into this season, think he probably has one of the best cases for the most improved, just the situation of the team with Tyrese being injured for this whole upcoming season, and just seeing what Nembhard was kind of doing in the finals, doing in the playoffs, being not shutting down Shea, but making it a lot harder for him to score. And I think he kind of proved to us that he is a good defensive player, and the team that they had looked like it was running a lot better whenever Nembhard would be controlling the pace of the ball, or he's being the main initiator of the offense. So that kind of going into this upcoming season in the situation that happened in that game 7, just kind of, it made sense for me personally to have him in this spot. I think, you brought it up earlier with Amen and just kind of the success of the team. I think that's definitely going to play in consideration. But if he takes a huge leap, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. I think he was averaging 10 and 5,
like 11,
11 and 5. I think if he could bump that up to 20, I think that would be, and that this would be his award to lose at that point. You're almost doubling your points. You're probably gonna get a little more assists, and
bro.
it's gonna be interesting, man. I'm excited. I think really this past playoffs, bro, seeing what he was able to do in the finals, hitting big shots, big moments, controlling the offense. Like I brought it up earlier too. I think there was moments in the finals when he was the one that was running the
He
offense
was
and
cooking, right?
Tyrese was just kind of chilling in the corner. So it's kind of interesting to see that. And then now they're kind of like, well, Nemhard, you're our guy now, so you're gonna be our guard, and we'll see where this goes. But I think it's we're not saying that the Pacers are gonna make it to the finals again, but I think they'll be a play-in team, playoff team, and he'll be a huge part of why they're in that position.
Yeah. No, 100%. I agree all the way. I think when we talk about the opportunity award, Andrew Nemhard is right in there, man. I think he's honestly kept them above water at times, like you said, especially in the playoffs. Garden Shea taking on the challenge. He only averaged 10 points this last season, but we know Pascal, Tyrese being there, that's kind of the main reason. But when you talk about getting the keys to the offense, man, we know Rick Carlisle is going to push the pace. We always say it, no pun intended, but that main guy is going to be Andrew Nemhard. And I'm excited to see the opportunities that he's going to get in the pick and roll, playing off of Pascal, and really with Benedict Mathurin too. I think those three dudes are going to be asked to do a lot. And I think Nemhard's going to be the main engine that's getting all of that going. So when you talk about him scoring the ball a little bit more, I think that's what you're going to get. I think the assist department would also rise. But yeah, from Canada, bro, we know those Canadian players are tough, and he's always been solid. I think he's finally getting the opportunity to show the type of player that he is. And he's a scrappy guard, somebody who can hit the three, control the offense. And yeah, bro, I think he's right up there in the most improved player running and can potentially finish first. Like you said, it's really, for me, the only thing that he needs to increase is his scoring, kind of similar to Amen Thompson. And I think his team is going to be above water, bro, because of that. I don't know if they'll be at the bottom of the East this year, even if they win 40 games, and barely go over their win total. I still think they'll make the playoffs, probably the 7 or 8 seed. And I think a really big reason will be because of Andrew Nemhard. And I think it just speaks to his consistency, bro, and what he's been able to grow his game over the last few years too. Because I don't think the Pacers were expecting him to be somebody that they could rely on a night in, night out basis. I think they gave him opportunities. He was able to come through for them, and now he's going to reap the benefits. So shout out Andrew Nemhard, bro. We know it's going to be a really good season. I think the Pacers are just looking for answers, and I think he is the answer.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. I like
Yeah,
that.
bro.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, bro, for sure. Well, you want to talk about the Portland Trailblazers, my man?
Yes, sir. Yeah, man. Let's get into it.
All right, for sure. Yeah. Well, for you guys who don't know, man, the way we do it on this show with the offseason files is we go through the three franchise players that they're building around, and then we head into their cap situation. We like to break down their balance sheet. We speak about the draft picks that they have as well. Then we go into some of the on the court and off the court improvements that they can make, some strategic things that we think three-man weave can help those teams out with. We're not in the NBA GMs yet. We're not the owners yet. We can't make decisions, but we can give our input. So that's what we're going to do, man. And I think to start it off, bro, what better way just to dive right into it? I think the first player that the Portland Trailblazers are definitely building around is none other than Shaedon Sharpe, man, the athletic freak, the guy who had the best dunk last season. Shaedon Sharpe's just turned into a killer, bro. One of the best ISO scorers that we have. I think he was a top 10 ISO scorer last year, actually, which is key fact. But he's very good in transition. I think his athleticism allows for him to be really special. We've seen him grow a good handle, a really good three-point shot as well. And he's had some injuries that have darkened his light a little bit. I think for me, he also needs to improve on the defensive end. But when we look at his numbers and what he's been able to give the Blazers when he's been out there, it's been really good. I think Shaedon Sharpe is one of the better players that we have in the league when he's healthy. And honestly, I think that's really good for the Blazers. I think they finally have somebody that they can build around. I thought that person was Simons, and we'll speak about that a little bit later too when we talk about their balance sheet and their cap situation. But I don't think they should have traded Simons. I think Simons and Sharpe were their two main dudes. But now that they traded Anthony Simons away, Shaedon Sharpe immediately steps in as the main guy, and he's proven that he can give you 30, 35-point nights when he's on. And so I think the Blazers have done a really good job building through the draft. We know that they've kind of been in purgatory over the last few seasons. And I think Shaden Sharp has been one of their gold mines over the last few years, especially when it comes to the development of their players and what they've been able to bring. So shout out to him. We know he's really athletic. I think, like I already said this, but just working on the defensive side of the ball for me is, and I think we'll talk about this later too. Portland has a ton of work to do on the defensive end,
Mm-hmm.
but they're very offensively gifted, and he's probably the most gifted on their team when it comes to offensive ability and what he can do in the air and all the good things like that. So shout out to Shaden Sharp, man. Clearly the number one player that they're building around.
Yep. No, yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think the thing with me that, Shaden Sharp, for me, that I'm wanting to see an improvement is the defense side, like you brought up. But what he could provide for your team offensively is incredible. Like you said, one of the best, most athletic players, getting to the rim, and him developing his jump shot. He averaged 18 and a half points this past season. So I
Yeah.
think he kind of, like you said, he has shown us that he has the capability of getting 30 points in a game and being kind of the engine for our offense, just being that forward that is super athletic, catching lobs, running the lanes, and doing all the, like you said, all the good stuff, all the flashy stuff. So I think him being their one of their players that they're building around makes perfect sense. He's definitely the best offensively gifted player on this team, and I think with him just improving each year, I think he's probably going to become the role of kind of being a little better on the defensive side because he has athletic abilities to do that. It's just really effort at that point. I think
Yeah.
that's something that once you start winning and you realize that, I think it's not hard to kind of shift your game and kind of being not locked down defender, but just a little bit better on the defensive side of the ball. But yeah, I agree. Shaden Sharp, definitely their main guy that they're building around for sure.
Yeah. And I think he's going to benefit from having Drew Holiday and Damian Lillard in his ear and just telling him what to do and what to look for. And he's somebody who could become a 25 plus points per game scorer in the NBA. I think his skill set says so. I think he's in a really good place for him to really showcase his offensive ability because we'll have to see what we get on the defensive end. But yeah, shout out Shaden Sharp for sure.
Yes, sir. Going into the next guy, we had to think about this one, man. The one and only Scoot Henderson. He's the number 3 overall pick. I think it's, that being him being so high of a draft pick, it kind of puts you in a position where, he doesn't have to be the guy that you're building around, but you have to definitely think about it. And since they traded away Simons, I think that is kind of their lead guard at this point that they're trying to lean on and hope for better improvement. As of right now, just because Dame's injured and stuff, but I think
when Dame comes back, it'll be
a little different. But as of right now, yeah. So I think he's seeing his improvement. He didn't have the greatest rookie season, had a pretty good sophomore season, I would say, for the most part. Felt like it went under the radar again, kind of like the situation with Denny, but I think that kind of just plays into you playing on the Blazers and them not being that well. But he played a lot better this last season. I think with him, it's just kind of developing a jump shot, obviously, but just kind of his recklessness in creating the offense. Just kind of, I think he's athletic, and I think that kind of at certain points in your career can be a negative thing because you don't really know how to control yourself, or when you're trying to get to a spot, you're overthinking it and you're just trying to blow past the guy when you could slow it down a little bit. I think that's something as a young guard, it's kind of takes you a couple years to get into that point. And I think, him going into his 3rd season, having that, bounce back sophomore year in a sense, because it wasn't a slump. He got a little bit better. And then heading into his 3rd year in the situation that the Portland Trailblazers are in, I think it's a good spot for him because it's giving him the keys. Obviously, Shaden Sharp is going to be the guy, but he's going to be the lead guard as of this upcoming season. So hopefully, he builds up that confidence and kind of shows us the type of prospect that he was. Whenever he was playing in, was it the G League? Yeah, G League. So kind of seeing the flashes that he showed us then, I think this is going to be hopefully it's going to be a great year for him to kind of prove that, he's not a bust he's not, he's not a good basketball player. I think it's just kind of getting his game figured out, slowing the game down and just sticking to that. Cause I think he's, one of the better, I wouldn't say he's the greatest, but he's a decently good defensive player, has a good athletic
Yeah,
ability. So I think it's kind of just building on top of that and getting more refined offensive game for him. So hopefully, the time is ticking, like you said, for sure. Though, if he doesn't
yeah.
kind of turn things around in the next couple seasons, this is when they're gonna have to think. But as of right now, yeah, you gotta put him in one of the players that they're building around.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you did a good job of highlighting their situation and where they currently stand. No Dame, right? They obviously traded away Simon, so it's like clearly they're signaling to us that Scoot is the dude. And you brought up some really good points. I think he needs to improve on the defensive end, but he has the value there. For me, it's the shot creation and his playmaking ability. I think at times he dribbles with his head down. He's very basket focused. Whenever he wants to score, he tries to score, and sometimes he can run into trouble with doing that. But I think seeing his offensive game grow last year was really exciting. It made me happy just to see him improve, and if he can continue to do that, there's really no reason why they can't build around him. I think he's one of the fastest players we have in the NBA. He's also one of the most athletic players we have at the point guard spot. So those are two things that you just don't get a lot of. You don't see a lot of that. So I think the Blazers, they had to take Scoot in the moment. Obviously, getting the third pick, it was kind of like a no-brainer pick situation. But I think they've done a decent job of developing, and not only just developing Scoot, but also developing the talent around Scoot to help him be a little bit better of a player. That's one of the reasons why they drafted Hanson Yang this year, and figuring out like who are the bigs going to be that Scoot can run the pick and roll with, because they haven't had bigs. They had Ayton last year, and it didn't pan out, right? But they haven't had an offensively gifted and developed through the draft. I don't know, man. It's just I think Scoot's in one of the toughest positions that you can be in for being in your third year, and being on the Blazers just it doesn't help a lot. But for sure, bro, this is somebody that they're building around. They've signaled to us that they're doing it through the transactions that they've made, and so we got to take Scoot. I think this is a solid guy, and I think he's on what was it? I forget the number. If I'm looking right, 44.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's
He
4 years,
has
40.
he has after this year he has one more year and then he's extension eligible. But
There you go.
he's
So
making
yeah,
10.7 right
yeah,
now.
100%. So there you go, man. Just to give you guys a little bit more background on Scoot's contract situation as well. But I think that plays into this. I think the Blazers understand that for this value right now, there's really no rushing Scoot Henderson's development. But going into our next dude, and this dude's the most polished guy that we have on our list. He's very solid. We spoke about him already, but it's none other than Denny Avdia. And I think, highlighting him in the MIP race just kind of shows you his capabilities. So I think he's on 4 year, $55 million deal. You did a good job of bringing that up earlier. He already signed his extension, but somebody who's given, I think he's outplaying his contract. Somebody who's given him consistent scoring. He's one of the best scorers that they have on their roster. I'd say the most polished scorer. He's not the most offensively gifted, right? I think Shaden Sharp has a little more upside, but Denny Avdia, man, controlling the pace. We've seen what he was able to do for the Wizards, coming over and doing it for the Blazers. I think he's in a really good spot to be their number three and potentially their number two guy. If Kamara ends up, taking that spot, or Lillard or whoever, Lillard is on his way out. Let's say it's Lillard. I would say Avdia is so young. I think he's 24 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, you can totally build around somebody who's 6'9", super offensively versatile, and just gifted in a lot of different ways. I think, like you said, he kind of went under the radar for a little while, because he's in Portland. He's not playing competitive basketball. I think that's neither here nor there, though. I think he's somebody who you need to keep on your radar and be on the lookout for. I think the Blazers are signaling to us that he's going to be somebody who's a focal point of the offense, more than Jerami Grant, more than Holiday, just more than some of the other guys who have gotten more opportunities, right? And I think it's finally coming around to his time. And I think, you guys are going to see that next year. At that number two, could potentially be a steal. So I'm excited to see what Denny Avdia can bring. I think the Blazers are in a good spot to have these three dudes be their core players. And I think all having them be under 25 speaks to this was hard. This is a hard list to come up with, guys, by the way. I think, I was trying to put Kamara on there. I thought they would probably be building around Avdia, and I think that's right. But just even the fact that it was hard for me to come up with their core players signals to us that the Blazers are in a good spot.
Yep.
There's nothing to be ashamed about. I think Denny Avdia helps them out a lot.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I think you explained it perfectly, bro. I think the fact that it was so hard figuring out what good young pieces they are building around. Just kind of says the direction that they're moving in, and whenever we get Dame back, it's just gonna help everyone out. So yeah, no, I agree with everything you said with Denny, bro. I think he's, like you said, not the most flashy or the offensive upside so much, but
Yeah,
he's going to be getting you probably 20 points per game this year on really good efficiency, and he's they're kind of most reliable guy, I would say. I say Shaden Sharp is pretty beat up for the most part. Scoot's been in and out the lineup, but Denny has been the one that's been there hooping these past
consistent.
couple of seasons. So I think it kind of only makes sense for him to be a part of their pieces that they're building around for this upcoming season for sure.
100%. Yeah, he's super solid. I know a lot of teams wish they had his value,
Mm-hmm.
and the Blazers are the lucky team that's got Denny. So shout out to those three dudes, man. Those are the three guys we think the Blazers are building around: Shaden Sharp, Scoot Henderson, Denny Avdia.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, going into the next segment of the offseason files, we go into their cap and roster situation. So for the Portland Trailblazers, their projected 2025-2026 payroll is $160 million. The Blazers are about $8 million away from the first apron. They are $19 million away from the second apron. The Trailblazers are tied for the second most dead money on their roster, as they owe DeAndre Ayton $24 million this year due to a buyout. I think that
Yeah,
Ayton trade, I mean, it sucks, or the buyout, but I think him just being off
got to do it.
yeah, you got to do it, especially for what they got building. They got really good young centers on their team. They don't really need Ayton, so it only made sense. It sucks,
No
but
problem.
for the most part, the roster's fairly
Real
good. The balance sheet and stuff, just they have
very healthy.
a lot of good young players. Obviously, Drew Holiday is the most paid, and then Jeremy Grant. But everyone else besides Dame, Denny has a contract for that is descending actually, which I feel like you don't see that a lot. But he's there for the next 2 years, and then everyone else is going to be due for extension. And I think, not saying that they're going to run in that problem, but if you do get Denny playing at this level, Scoot ends up having a great year. Shaden Sharp ends up getting whatever he does this upcoming season. It might start to get a little
I
dicey,
see.
yeah. But
Yeah,
I think that's the only thing that sucks with the new CBA rules. But if you're building up your team, you've done it through the draft. I think that the Thunder are a great example of this. They paid their guys, and yes, we might be getting into the luxury tax, but if you have a good roster, then it's okay to do stuff like that. If you're
right.
competing,
It
obviously
makes sense.
not saying
Yeah,
the Blazers are doing that yet, but they have the potential if all these young guys can amount to the potential that they're, hyped up to have. So I think,
yeah, for sure that they can come through on, like you're
right.
saying. Yeah,
Yeah. Going into the draft capital, the Trailblazers own all their picks through 2032. Think that's something that doesn't really happen a lot. There's
happened.
always
Yeah,
trades, there's always swaps, there's always everything. So the fact that they have that already super good. They have a pick swap with
by far.
Chicago in 2026 that could be conveyed if the Blazers fall outside of the top 14. It is unlikely this happens unless Portland rises throughout the East or the West. Yeah, no, it's I think draft capital is probably the highest, most valuable asset that you can have right now at this point, and the fact that they have all of their picks, they can really, if they see the
Do anything.
development of their certain players, they can make a move. They could trade it, whatever. They trade one of their guys. Who knows? They're in such a good spot with their roster. It's kind of, we were I talked about them towards the tail end of the last season, just seeing what they were able to do and being super impressed with it. I think it's a great situation for them, being able to find guys that they're building around and kind of bring in Dame and kind of have him mentor everyone and just kind of build up
Yeah,
like a
bro.
winning culture in a sense. Not saying
Yeah,
you're gonna make it to the playoffs, but just be in the running for it, be in the play in that 9 or 10 sleeve, just to kind of
competing
get
for it. Yeah,
exactly, and just see an improvement from the last season. I think this is that type of year that I could see the Trailblazers having. So yeah, no, the roster looks good, balance sheet looks good. Can't complain. They got their
yeah,
draft capital. Not a lot of people could say that. So I think they're in a really good spot for the roster as of right now for sure.
yeah. Yeah, Portland is one of the cheapest rosters in the NBA. They also are one of the only teams to own all their picks. I mean, there's a reason they're in the bottom tier of the league. Clearly, right? They're
Right.
playing a little money ball. They're trying to build through the draft. There's nothing wrong with that. You did a really good job of going over that, though. I think it's rare to see a team buckle down, understand they need to build through their future and not trade away their picks. Yeah, they in 2028, we'll talk about this a little later as well, but they do have some decisions to make with some guys, becoming free agents. I think that is when Lillard, Holiday, and Grant come off their books as well. So there's going to be a little bit more money opening up. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I think Portland's in a really good spot for their balance sheet. Not a ton we can assess there, which is good. I think they're not nowhere near the apron. They're not in the Thunder situation where they're going to be in the apron, and they're not like in a Cleveland Sun situation. They have the buyout, the dead money on their books, which is never good. I think the Ayton situation didn't end up panning out too well, clearly, but he's on my Lakers, so I can't complain. You're not going to hear me talking mess about that, but I think the Blazers are in a much better spot now that they brought back Dame on a little bit of a cheaper contract. They have some veteran guys that can help mentor those other dudes like you brought up. So really, really good stuff from the Blazers. I was happy to peel back the layers on this one. So I'm glad we went through it. But going into the improvements that they can make on the court and off the court, man, I think this is really important. This is why I wanted to start it off, the segment with this point. But they need to figure out who their center is. And we've been talking about all these guards and forwards. Kumara, we haven't talked about much.
No.
He's great. Advia's great. Lillard, Holiday, right? Sharp, Scoot. But man, Klingon, Yang Hansen. Come on, man. Like we got to figure it out. I think ultimately the reason why you want to have bigs that are not only capable but competent is because you have all these guards who need pick and roll partners. That's one, we just spoke about this, but Ayton didn't end up panning out, and that's really unfortunate because they thought he was probably going to be Simon's, Scoot's running mate, being able to really run the offense, and that didn't end up working out. And I think it was because of what was all the issues that he had on the defensive end. It wasn't really his offensive ability. But I will say this, Donovan Clingan, I think, is probably one of the best defenders in the NBA when given the opportunity. So I think that is really, really good. If he's able to play 30, 32 minutes a night, I think he will become one of the premier defenders in the NBA, potentially make an all-defensive team if he gets 3-4 blocks a night. I think that's somebody who can do so. I'm interested to see what comes from that too in terms of an offensive standpoint. I don't know. I know Ayton can score, but I'm not sure how Kling is going to perform on that. And just who's starting, right? The rotations. I think you could go with the two big lineup if you wanted to at times. But deciding on who's starting on any given night is going to be tough. But I think that's really important, to figure that out, who your center is going to be. And I think that's the only blip on the Blazers roster currently for me that I can see is just who's going to be that consistent, guy at the center position, who we know is going to be holding down the paint, who we know can score and be a part of the offense. And so I'm really interested to see what Billups does this next year. And ultimately, it's just something that they need to figure out now that they've addressed the guard situation. I think we've spoke about the forwards and the guards that they have a combination of all those athletic and really quick guys and, polished dudes, but who's your center?
Yeah. No, yeah, that is definitely the question I had for the roster as well. Like, who is going to be starting? Obviously it's probably going to be Klingon, but they also have Robert Williams. They have, Yang Hansen, like you said, and I think with the type of player that Hansen is, it's kind of you gotta have him play. That's just the type of player.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're gonna have to play
it's someone
Hansen.
just the way his talent, his capabilities. It's why would you not have that player on the court? So I think the thing with Klingon, right, is usually he's not playing the minutes. I think it's more so like a cardio like type of thing or something. Or
I agree.
It's just he really hasn't been able to play that much because of that. But I think if he could get that under control and then kind of get Yang Hansen on the court whenever he's tired, it might just be whenever one's off, the other one's on the court type of vibe. Or
yeah, for sure, like an on-off type of thing.
Maybe like you said, double big potentially. But I think that's really the only spot position wise where it's kind of like the question mark. Obviously, we've seen the what Donovan Clegan can be. It's just if he can do it for 32 minutes or a full game, whatever it is. So I think that's definitely on the court priority they gotta prioritize for sure.
Yeah, 100%, dude. And it's been glaring for the last few seasons. They've been trying to address the center position for the last few years, and they haven't been able to nail it down. So I think that kind of takes me into the next point, though. Getting a defensive identity. You have all these guards. You have some pretty comparable bigs on the defensive end, but I think their guards now are the issue. I think Portland's been at the bottom of the league in defense the last few seasons, and it's because of their poor guard play on that side of the ball. Simon, Scoot, and Sharp were not lockdown defenders. So Lillard isn't either. So they need to figure out, what type of defensive identity they can bring. I would say Kumara, Klingon, right? We talked about Drew Holiday for a second. Clearly, we know he can lock down, but I think it needs to be a collective effort. And it does start in the back end, right? That's why we talked about the centers, but the Blazers really don't have offensive, holes they need to address. They have good shooters. They have guys who can score the ball. I think it's just the defensive side of the ball and really figuring out their identity. You brought him up, the Time Lord, Robert Williams, who can't seem to stay on the NBA court, but when he is on the court, he's one of the better defenders we have in the league, very athletic. So they have the guys to do it, but it's been weird how they haven't put it together. And I think this season, that's what I'm going to be watching for. I know it was second on the list, but for me, if they create a defensive identity, I think they could have issues at the center spot and be okay. I truly believe that if they buy in on that side of the ball, I think it's going to change Portland's trajectory for their future. I think, not only is Chauncey going to have a job going forward, but I just think the players are going to care more because they're going to be in games, they're going to be winning, and it's going to matter. And guys like playing basketball, that matters. They don't like playing basketball when you're 20 and 60. It's the last game of the season. No defense is going to be played, but give me some competitive basketball from the Blazers, and I think that starts on the defensive side of the ball.
No, yeah, I think keep bringing it up, but just kind of what they were doing at that tail end of the season, I think we saw the flashes of what they could be on the defensive side. So I think going into this next season, they just lock in on that. Like you said, doesn't really have holes on the offense, so not really worried about what y'all can do on that side of the ball. It's just being kind of like how the Pacers were, bro. Like not, you have Kamara, who's one of the best defenders in the league on all defensive team, but besides that, you don't really have like those type of guys on the court. So, but if you're able to buy into the system, figure out what it is to just make it harder for the other team to get their offense going, like kind of how the Pacers were, just get pressure on the ball, right when you get the ball and when you throw the ball in. But just think if they're able to do that, it's gonna be exciting. Like you said, it's definitely gonna be something I'm gonna be looking out for too, because I think that is why they are on the bottom half of the standings these past couple seasons, is because they haven't been able to be consistent offensive or defensively. But at that season Kamara had, and then that great tail end of the season, I think it's gonna hopefully go into this upcoming season and just kind of show us. I think it's gonna be interesting to be on the lookout for that for sure.
Yeah, like they got to figure that out. I think their defensive rating's been in like the 115, 118 range, and it's not gonna cut it. You're giving up 120 points per 100 possessions. Like, get out of here, bro. Yeah. That's not gonna work, So I think the Blazers got to focus on the defensive side of the ball. That's why they're trying to address the center position. We know it starts at the back, but yeah, I think their guards got to give a little bit more effort on that side.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but yeah, you got it. Take it away.
Yeah, going into the off the court priorities, contract restructuring. The Blazers must carefully time extensions, starting with Shaedon Sharpe, then Scoot Henderson, and then Denny Advida, to nail down their core while preserving future flexibility. Managing who they re-sign now determines whether they can strike aggressively before 2028. Portland still have the option to clear room on their salary ledger. The golden year is 2028, when the contracts of Lillard, Holiday, and Jeremy Grant all come off the books. We brought that up earlier a little bit a while ago, but I think that year is really going to put them in a spot where they can really make some moves. Portland never is really like a free agency destination, but if they start winning and kind of build up a culture, you could potentially get someone. They haven't been really shy to pay the guys that they want on their team. So, I think that's the main thing that they got to really figure out. Obviously, a lot of young talent that is, going to be due for extension soon. And, I think if they could figure that out, it'll help them out in the long run for their future. I think nailing down that core that we brought up earlier is really probably the main priority. Obviously, have Denny for a couple more years, but when that contract extension comes back up again, then that's when you're gonna have the conversations. But Sharp is probably going to get paid a lot, and I'm
Yeah,
assuming if Scoot has a decent year, he'll probably
like 180.
be getting a decent amount too. So they have the young guys, and now they just have to figure out the restructuring of all their contracts whenever that time comes.
Yeah, they've done a good job of keeping the roster cheap, but you don't want to get into an apron for a team that's not competing for a finals, and they can't do that. So they're gonna have to make some really tough decisions, probably let go of some guys who they probably don't want to let go of. Potentially a Tumani Kamara, right? He might outplay his value, and that's understandable. So you can't keep everybody, but I think you did a really good job of describing that. Yeah, in 2028 they have to figure out the key situations with their main dudes, and it's because they'll be coming into a lot of money. So they got a few more seasons until that comes along. We know they might be able to make some deals before then. I'm excited to see what the Blazers end up doing. They might extend, Shaedon Sharp a little early. There's a couple people who I could see get extended early. Denny Avdia is another one of them. Kamara is one of them as well. But they're in a spot where it could get a little dicey depending on how well their players play, and if the Blazers outplay their current projection. They're supposed to be like 11th in the West this year. There's a chance they get into the play-in. If everybody's healthy and guys are playing, on a string, like I said, the defensive continuity is there and they're playing through their guys and the guards are playing well. There's no reason why they wouldn't be able to make the play-in with this roster. So I think it does start with restructuring the balance sheet and understanding what you have in terms of value. And I think the Blazers are in a really good spot to do that. But yeah, they need to make sure that they get that done because that's really important.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Let's take it home. The last point that we have on this list for off the court improvements they can make is understanding they got a lot of draft capital, managing their draft capital. What does that look like? Potentially packaging that together with one of your younger players for an all-star. I don't know if the Blazers are looking to do so, but I know some teams would definitely hear them out if you own all of your picks through 2032, especially those first round picks. I think those first round picks are probably 5-star value in today's NBA. So that can get you a lot, depending on what Shaedon Sharp, Scoot, Denny, Kamara, whoever it turns into, these upcoming draft picks as well, because I don't know who they could take. They could end up getting the number one pick in the draft, get AJ DeBansta. This changes the whole thing.
Yeah.
So you never know. The NBA is crazy, but they have to understand that if the next 2-3 seasons, they can't firmly be a competing playoff team, they got to trade some of those picks so they can get a good player like a Dame Lillard, like somebody that they can build a franchise around that could give them a boost. I'm not sure who that would be. I would be interested to see who the Blazers would, reach out to. There's a lot of guys who are coming into expensive contracts, and so they would have to be willing to not only if they made a trade, but make the money work. It's not going to be easy to get an all-star guy to come to Portland, but I think if you make an offer like 3 first-round picks, like 4 first-round picks, if you go all in, then it's kind of hard to say no because you're offering a franchise another reset. And I think the Blazers are in a position to do so if they want to. Now, this season they're not going to do it. I think over the next 2 to 3 years, though, you could see some of those picks get traded because, one, guys are developed, but two, the Blazers are going to have to decide what type of team they are. And I think over the next 2 to 3 years is when that time is going to come. So the writing is on the wall. They have the picks available, and obviously more picks become available because time is perpetual. So they'll have the 2033, the 2034s as well, which again just gives them more assets to look towards in the future. So there's really no reason why they shouldn't put those draft picks on the table and look to package one of their guys to get an all-star.
Mm-hmm. Who do you think is going to be the odd man out in that conversation?
Like who would get traded?
Who would get traded? Yeah. Who do you think?
Probably Scoot.
Scoot in what, 4 first rounds?
Yeah, like it would have to be like a lot of picks, but I think a team could take a chance on him because he's so young, and then if you give us the picks, that really doesn't matter because we have your draft. So, if you guys are finishing first tier, like we're gonna get some good solid players on our team. So I think it would be Scoot Henderson. Who do you think?
I was probably leaning Scoot too, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's understandable, man. I think he's kind of out of everybody on the Blazers roster, his time is like it's almost it's close to being
Ticking.
like, all right, they're gonna make some changes. Anybody on that team, it would be Scoot. So I understand.
Yeah. Yeah, you got me thinking now. Like what type of player would that be that they would trade for? Or who do you think they would try to get? Would it be like a big, or would it be
Probably be like a guard.
a guard?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you would be trading
If it's
Scoot away.
not,
Obviously, Drew Holiday's probably not on the team, or he's getting too
and it's
expensive.
just hard. Like, there's not a ton of great bigs either.
Mm-hmm. And they got
That would like,
bigs, so
yeah, it
yeah,
would like change your team.
interesting.
I think like it would be like a guard forward, and yeah, I just think that again the draft capital that they have says they can do it. I think you're looking at you have to look at the haul for Kevin Durant. I mean those 4 first round picks is like crazy.
Yeah.
I think it was winning for Brooklyn, but
Damn, you got me thinking now. Who would Portland be able to get for them to? It's a good exercise. I like that. I'm thinking.
yeah, we could think about it for sure. But I'm not sure it'll happen this offseason.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we'll
I don't.
see.
I don't think it will either. But definitely
They
something.
could. NBA's crazy, yeah.
Make a splash, bro. Before we know it.
Why not?
Why not?
Why not, right? Shout out Portland, man. No, you ready to close this offseason file for them?
Yeah, bro. It was a good one. If they do the off or the on the court and off the court, define their center position, establish their defensive identity, and then for the off the court, contract restructuring and managing their draft capital. I think Portland is in a good spot, man. Shout out to all the Portland fans. I feel like they've been going through it these past couple of seasons since Dame left, and then obviously he's came back, but kind of seeing what Scoot has turned into and all those young assets, y'all are making moves in the right direction. You have a good team,
Totally.
and you can potentially make the
Totally.
play-in, man. I wouldn't be surprised, especially just seeing
No.
how they finished this past season and kind of getting all the pieces together. So, I think that's it for me, man.
Yeah, it's
Was
tough
there
not to
anything?
get excited about it, right? Like every team we talk about, like we'll talk about the Wizards, we're excited.
We're
Like,
excited, yeah.
not to hate on Washington or anything, but
Yeah.
it's just like we're fans of the game. So I think
I think it's
dope
just, especially since we were like diving deep and kind of like thinking of who
like
they could
break it down
potentially get in a
for like
trade to
30
make them
minutes.
better. Yeah. So, I think, kind of goes to show, you just love hoops, bro. Love talking about it.
100%.
I think that's,
I think the Blazers have a cheap roster too, bro.
Super
Like they've
cheap.
done a good job of just keeping all their guys under one roof and not overstepping their boundaries. They're still looking to build, and I think when Lillard comes back in I guess 2 years, we'll talk about it again.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about it. Is he going to be one of the players that they're building around?
Probably.
Right.
And it's like that's because that's who I think they're gonna trot Lillard out, expect him to give you 20. I think he's gonna be expected to do some damage probably for the next, I would say the year or two after, because I think did he sign a 3-year deal or is it 4?
He signed a 3-year deal.
So there you go. So this year it counts.
Yep.
So for the next 2 years, they're gonna expect him to be probably 20 points per game. I think he'll be solid, bro. He'll be Damian Lillard for the Blazers.
Exactly.
Not the same Lillard, but like Dame
It's
time
Dame,
for sure.
man. It's still Dame time for sure.
Come on, man. For sure.
Was there anything you want to let the people know before we head out of here, man?
Nah, man. We're just wrapping up these off-season files. Hopefully people enjoyed, got us through the off-season, and season starts soon. I'm ready to kind of get NFL in the rear view mirror, but I don't know. I'm. It's like prison time, honestly. Off-season, it's like you kind of just gotta wait your sentence, but after that, I'm a free man.
Yeah.
So that's all I can say.
Hell yeah. No, yeah, man. Can't wait for the season to start. I feel like, we've been, like you said, these off-season files are super dope. We get to dive deep in a team and kind of just get us ready for the year, bro. Like, since we started, it's been like, oh, man, I can't wait for the season to start.
They go through all 30, bro.
30,
yeah,
man.
Yeah.
So, no.
You know what's going on with all of them for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. But no, I don't have anything else to say, man. If y'all liked and enjoyed this episode of 3 Man Weave, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time, man. Peace. 3 Man, 3 Man, 3 Man.